The 14th of October, 1943, Heinrich Himmler dismissed American B-17 flying fortresses as flying coffins, laughing as 60 of them were shot down in a single day over Germany, the bloodiest mission in Air Force history. But what he didn't realize was that America was already building replacements faster than Germany could destroy them, and within months. Over 1,000 bombers would darken German skies in formation so massive they blocked out the Sunday. How did a nation Himmler called racially inferior manage to turn the skies of the Third Reich into an American highway of death? The spring air in Berlin felt warm on Heinrich Himmler's face as he walked through the grand halls of the Reich Ministry. Outside, German workers sang as they built new tanks and planes. The year 1942 brought nothing but good news. German armies had crushed France in just 6 weeks. Norway fell in 2 months. The Soviet Union was cracking under the weight of German steel and fire. In the aircraft factories across the Reich, workers smiled as they built the finest fighter planes in the world. The Messerschmitt Bf 109 could outfly anything the Allies had. German pilots were the best trained, with years of combat experience. They had shot down thousands of enemy planes. The Focke-Wulf 190 was so advanced that Allied pilots feared even seeing one in the sky. Himmler stopped at a large window overlooking the city. Church bells rang across Berlin. Families walked in parks. Children played games in the streets. Food was still plentiful, though some items required ration cards. The people believed in their leaders. They trusted that German science and German courage would win this war quickly. The radar stations along the Atlantic coast worked perfectly. German engineers had built the most advanced air defense system in the world. Huge anti-aircraft guns protected every major city and factory. When enemy planes approached, the guns would fill the sky with exploding shells. Few bombers made it through alive. At Luftwaffe headquarters, Hermann Göring spread maps across a massive oak table. Red pins showed where German fighters had shot down Allied planes. The numbers looked impressive. Every day brought reports of enemy aircraft burning and crashing into the sea. Göring smiled as he read pilot reports describing easy victories against poorly trained Allied crews. Then came the first intelligence reports from the West. Small groups of American bombers had appeared over occupied Europe. The B-17 Flying Fortress and B-24 Liberator looked clumsy and slow compared to German fighters. Intelligence officers laughed when they studied photographs of these machines. The American planes seemed thrown together quickly, without the careful engineering that made German aircraft superior. Himmler picked up a report about these new American bombers. His aide had written notes in the margins, calling them flying coffins and death traps for their crews. The planes flew in straight lines during daylight, making them easy targets for German fighters. Their defensive guns seemed weak, their armor looked thin. But something in the report made Himmler pause. The Americans were building these planes in huge factories. The numbers seemed impossible. Boeing in Seattle, Consolidated in San Diego, Douglas in California. Each factory was larger than anything in Germany. Could this be true? Himmler set the report aside. American industry had always produced cheap goods that broke easily. German engineering was careful and precise. Quality would always beat quantity. These American flying coffins would fall from the sky as soon as they met German fighters in real combat. Outside his window, the first air raid sirens of the war began their haunting wail. The photographs spread across Colonel Weber's desk made his hands shake. He counted the aircraft in the aerial pictures again and again. The Boeing factory in Seattle stretched for miles. Rows and rows of B-17 bombers sat on the tarmac like silver beetles. He had never seen so many planes in one place. The American factory was 10 times larger than Germany's biggest aircraft plant. Weber walked quickly to Himmler's office, with the pictures tucked under his arm. His boots clicked loudly on the marble floors. Outside, he could hear the distant rumble of engines. More American bombers were coming, not the small groups from last year. These formations had 50 planes, sometimes 100. The flying coffins kept multiplying like angry wasps. In the interrogation room below, Captain Mueller sat across from a young American airman. The boy looked maybe 20 years old. His flight jacket was torn and bloody from his parachute landing. But his eyes were calm, too calm for someone who had just been shot down. "How many crews are training back home?" Mueller asked in careful English. The American smiled. "Thousands, sir. We graduate new bomber crews every week. For every plane you shoot down, we build 10 more. My training base had 5,000 men when I left." Mueller felt cold despite the warm room. 5,000 men at one training base. How many bases did America have? Down in the factory district, Herr Krantz watched black smoke rise from his aircraft plant. The American bombs had hit 3 buildings exactly. Not the workers' houses nearby. Not the hospital across the street. Just the 3 buildings where they made fighter plane engines. The bombs had fallen like they knew exactly where to go. His workers stood in the rubble, their faces gray with dust and fear. Yesterday they had laughed about American bombers being easy targets. Today they swept up the pieces of their machines and counted their dead friends. Luftwaffe pilot Hans Richter landed his damaged Messerschmitt and climbed out slowly. His mechanic ran over to check the bullet holes in the wings. Richter had shot down 2 B-17 seconds that morning. But there had been 300 bombers in the formation. Even after losing 20 planes, the Americans had dropped their bombs and flown home. "They filled the whole sky," Richter told his commander. "I have never seen so many planes at once. We shot down as many as we could, but there were always more behind them." That evening, Himmler stood at his window watching searchlights sweep the dark sky. The air raid sirens wailed again. Somewhere above the clouds, American engines droned like hungry thunder. He thought about the photographs on his desk, the endless rows of bombers in American factories, the reports of new crews arriving every day. Maybe the Americans were not building flying coffins after all. Maybe they were building something much worse. The ground shook under Himmler's feet as he stood in the concrete bunker. Above, 1,000 American bombers blotted out the February Sunday. The sound was like standing inside rolling thunder that never stopped. Through the thick bunker walls, he could hear the whistle and crash of falling bombs. Each explosion made dust rain from the ceiling. His aide counted the formations through a periscope. 1,050 B-17 seconds, sir. Another 800 B-24 seconds behind them. The young officer's voice cracked with fear. They stretched from horizon to horizon. Himmler closed his eyes and remembered his words from 2 years ago. Flying coffins, death traps, crude American junk that would fall from the sky. Now those same planes flew overhead in numbers that made German fighter response impossible. The Luftwaffe had maybe 200 fighters left. The Americans had brought over 1,800 bombers to this single raid. The bombing lasted 4 hours. When the all-clear sirens finally wailed, Himmler climbed the bunker steps into daylight. The aircraft factory that had employed 10,000 workers was gone. In its place lay twisted metal and burning ruins. The precision was perfect. The Americans had not wasted a single bomb on empty ground. He walked through the rubble with careful steps. Pieces of German fighter planes lay scattered like broken toys. These were the same planes that were supposed to be the finest in the world. Now they would never fly. The workers who built them would never work again. An old factory foreman sat on a broken wall, tears running down his dirty face. "Herr Himmler," the man said quietly, "how do we fight this? They have more planes than we have bullets." That night, Himmler sat alone in his office and opened his personal diary. His hands shook as he wrote. "We called them flying coffins and laughed at American weakness, but we were blind fools. Every day they return in greater numbers. We shoot down 50 and 100 take their place. These are not the soft Americans of our propaganda. These are the destroyers of the Reich." He set down his pen and stared at the words. Everything he had believed about German superiority was crumbling, like the factories outside his window. American bomber crews were not poorly trained weaklings. They were part of a vast machine that could replace losses faster than Germany could inflict them. The realization hit him like a physical blow. The 1,000-year Reich was being systematically torn apart from 30,000 feet above. The flying coffins were never coffins at all. They were the instruments of German death. Outside his window, searchlights swept empty skies. The Americans were already gone, flying safely back to England. Tomorrow they will return with even more planes. And there was nothing Germany could do to stop them. The sky over Germany belongs to America now. 2,000 bombers flew overhead like a moving silver cloud that stretched beyond sight. Himmler watched from his prison cell window as formations of B-17 seconds and B-24 seconds passed without fear. No German fighters rose to meet them. The Luftwaffe was dead. The factories that built their planes were piles of rubble. American guards walked the prison halls with calm confidence. Their boots were well-made leather. Their uniforms were clean and pressed. They carried chocolate bars and chewing gum like these things that cost nothing. One guard offered Himmler an American cigarette through the cell bars. The tobacco was better than anything Germany had produced even before the war. In the prison yard, Himmler met other Nazi leaders who had once ruled Europe. Goering had grown thin without his fancy meals. Speer stared at the ground and spoke in whispers. They all understood the same terrible truth. They had lost to a nation they never really understood. The American prosecutor showed Himmler photographs during his trial preparation. Pictures of Detroit car factories that had been changed to build bombers. Workers in Seattle building B-17 seconds on assembly lines that moved like clockwork. Women in overalls welding aluminum while their children played in company daycare centers. The scale was beyond anything the Reich had ever imagined. "Your intelligence reports called our bombers flying coffins," the American lawyer said. "But you built the real coffin. You buried your own country in it." That evening, Himmler sat in his cell and wrote his final thoughts. The small pencil felt heavy in his fingers. Through the barred window, he could see American transport planes landing at German airfields. Planes full of food and medicine for the people his government had led into disaster. He wrote slowly, choosing each word with care. "We called them flying coffins and laughed at their weakness. But the coffin was never theirs. It was ours. When the sky filled with their bombers, we were already dead. We just did not know it yet. American power was not a crude quantity without quality. It was quality at a scale we could never match. That was the war's real lesson, and we learned it too late." The next morning, guards found his cell empty. Himmler had chosen his own ending, rather than face the full weight of his mistakes. His final diary lay open on the small table. The last entry was a single sentence. "The flying coffins taught us who was really dying." Outside the prison walls, American bombers continued their flights over Germany, but now they carried food and supplies instead of bombs. The same planes that had destroyed the Reich were helping to rebuild it. The irony was not lost on those who survived to see it.